Welcome everyone here to the Thriving Marriage. I'm Heather Choate with Marc Johnston. If you can see and hear us okay, let us know in the comments. How are you doing, Marc?
I'm doing all right. I'm just excited because, we haven't been able to really do one of these together in a while. There's just been all sorts of weird technology problems that we weren't really able to figure out, finally found a workaround. So yeah, it's just good to have good to have this going.
Yeah, we are super excited to be with you guys. So let us know in the chat any questions that you have. And today we're going to be talking about commitment and how to increase commitment from your partner, how to create commitment in your marriage. Now, you guys have been following us for a while. You know that this is actually our very last step of our PATH method. We've been talking about the 4 previous steps, which is hitting the pause button, having your spouse take steps towards you, and then deepening connection. And then the final one is commitment. And we're going to show you why you should not push for your spouse's commitment too soon, because that's a huge mistake. But before we get to that, though, we're going to share our client win of the week. And this one comes with permission from Christy. She says, for anyone on the fence about joining High Thrive, I hope my post will make you want to change your life. My husband left me 3 months ago, and I did everything I shouldn't do. Beg, plead, resisted him for doing this. There was zero communication. After almost 2 months with High Thrive and following all advice and listening outside of myself, they gave me the tools I needed to make this work. My husband and I are now slowly working on reconciliation, and things are going amazing. I did the work and they made me understand how my husband might be feeling, but I couldn't have gotten there without the advice, support, and strength of every single one of the coaches. Good luck to you all, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. So that is exactly what this process is about. It's for helping you when your spouse says, I want out, right? And he left her 3 months ago. And all the mistakes that are so common that most people are making, we help you recognize how those things are ineffective and often even backfiring, and guide you through this process, give you those tools like she talks about to reconcile, so that you start to get communication open and they actually want to work on the marriage with you. And after they want to work on the marriage with you, then you can go into this last step, which is commitment. So Marc, why is it such a big mistake to push for your spouse's commitment too soon in this process? Because so many people are doing that. I mean, raise your hand, leave a comment if you've done that yourself.
I just have to kind of give this big sign like, wow, well, okay, if your partner is stepping away from the marriage, if they're considering separation, if they're considering divorce, or perhaps that they're engaged in an affair, well, trying to say, well, you need to work on this, or you really pushing them to commit while they're resisting, really isn't going to do a whole lot of good. We talk about this sometimes here. It's a big issue because of what we call the impossible problem. The impossible problem is all these concerns, these things that your spouse how your spouse views the relationship and says, these things are impossible to solve. And so it's easier for me to step away, for me to look for solutions elsewhere rather than resolve this problem. So if you say, no, you need to commit to making this work, they're saying, well, no, it can't work. And there's this big disconnect there. And so you're going to end up getting a lot of resistance. Either they're going to stonewall you and retreat and get quiet, or they're going to fight with you and escalate things and create all these arguments. And that's a lot of why, like what is going on there, essentially.
Yeah. One of the things that's really important is you make sure you solve problems in order.
Yeah.
And when I'm meeting with people in masterclasses or talking to you guys here on Facebook or YouTube, so many times you guys are pushing for connection and commitment right off the bat, which I understand why. You feel like it's very scary, right? When your spouse wants out, when they're saying, I'm done, it's over, there's nothing you can do. You're like, well, commit to me, like come back to me, right? I want that assurance. I want to feel safe again. But in this situation, that's only going to backfire, because honestly, it's really only thinking about yourself in this situation. You're wanting yourself to feel more secure. And right now you're not really taking into consideration what your spouse is wanting. And so it's not going to work. they're not going to come back to you when you're just saying, come back to me, give me your commitment. And B, it's also going to make them feel like you don't understand, like you're not validating them, you're not respecting them, you're not trying to understand where they're really coming from. And so what we do is we start with first things first. And the first thing you need to do is slow down that momentum of, going further off the rails and over the cliff, right? And slow down that momentum so we can get the train going in the right direction. And that's why we have you hit the pause button first. And then as they hit the pause button, now you have the opportunity to turn that momentum and have it start moving towards you, where they actually want to work on marriage with you. They want to talk with you. That's what we help our clients do with this process. And I know some of you have experienced that. So leave a comment if you've experienced hitting the pause button, having your spouse take steps towards you. And if you haven't, let us know where you're at and what's holding you back, because we respond to every single comment that we get. And I see some of you watching, so hello and welcome, but I'm not seeing any comments yet. So go ahead in the comments and let us know where you're at. We will help you with exactly what you're going through. So now let's talk about this last step, which is like the ice cream, the cherry on the top, right? If we're building an ice cream sundae, this is going to be the final ingredient that goes on the top. Yep. And that is commitment. And so let's be really clear, like commitment is the end result of many other things going right. And many times, like you're going to want it right off the bat, it's not going to work. So we have to work towards this end goal. So Marc, what really helps us get to this place?
Well, I'm liking what you said there. It is the end result. And just like we were talking about earlier, if you're trying to push for that, it's almost like, and it works against itself. Like the way I see it, it's almost like this thing that you can't really, I mean, you can and you can't really necessarily ask for it. It's the result of many other things going well that is going to allow for your partner to decide to commit. And of course, like we get it. If you're struggling in your marriage, of course, you want there to be some commitment. And, commitment, it creates a lot of security. It helps everyone know that the relationship will survive as the two of you figure out some solutions. But, if your spouse has been leaning away from the marriage, as we said earlier, they're looking for some sense of security elsewhere, some sort of answer to solve their problems. And this might look like a lot of different things. They might be saying, okay, I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to avoid the drama and stress by simply not engaging anymore. Or perhaps they're engaged in an affair. They say, the affair provides what I need. Or perhaps they're so deep down the rabbit hole of blame and contempt that any kind of solution other than working on things with you seems like a better option. And so a lot of this, all these scenarios are because your partner is unable currently to see any sort of viable solution with you. So it just, these sort of scenarios don't allow for your partner to commit to the situation. But like that's not what we're here to talk about. We're wanting to explain, well, how do we create this? So I don't know, like I hope that like helps with some understanding. But like Heather, what are we talking about here? What do we need to start talking about in order to create that commitment? What are we talking about here?
I'm sorry, I've got some, I accidentally hit play on this on my phone to get the comments, and it's probably giving you guys some feedback. So I apologize. We're using Zoom today, and it's I'm not able to see your comments. So I see that some of you guys are commenting. I was hoping I could use my phone.
I can see the comments here while we're all doing
this.
Do we want to get to some comments? We can get to some comments.
Yeah, let's get to some comments, and then we'll dive into like, what does commitment really mean and what needs to happen to create that for you guys, and how Marc and I have honestly created that in our own marriages with our spouses.
Yeah. So Phil's saying, my wife seems to want to do things with me again, but our divorce was just finalized yesterday. I don't know how to get her to commit to, this is busing a thing again, but I'm guessing like trying things out again. We have another one, Laura, and we're going to get to both of these. Laura's saying, what do we do when my spouse gives me mixed signals? One day we're getting on great, another he's stone cold. I don't know what you think, Heather. I'm seeing some similar sort of ideas or similar sort of, even though they're at different stages. I think both
Mhm.
Phil and Laura are dealing with something very similar.
Yeah, what I'm seeing right off the bat is it's not the time to ask for commitment because you're not there yet. And so asking for it right now is going to backfire. If your spouse is hot and cold, I believe it was Laura that said that. He's warm and then he's cold. He'll open up and then he shuts down. That's what we call the teeter-totter effect, which means you're most likely heading towards step 2, where they're starting to take steps towards you, but then they also pull away. And now we need to go into step 3, which is deepening that connection first.
Yeah.
If your spouse isn't fully willing to work on things with you, then pushing for any level of commitment for your own like self-assurance is going to be the wrong thing to do. So that's why we have the other steps in this process.
Yeah, and it's almost like I think it's a good comparison in this case is like the beginning stages of the dating process. If you're like exploring the relationship still, and one person says, well, okay, you know, we had a great second date, when are we going to get married? That seems really out of place. And similarly, you know, if the other person has been leaning away or has been going back and forth and wants to spend time with you, but then is upset at other times, things aren't settled quite enough to say, okay, let's commit to this. Can you actually say that you're going to be with me forever or anything like that? It's just not possible. Like,
Yeah.
perhaps maybe some smaller commitments, but certainly not for like the marriage in its entirety.
Right. We talk about this making bids that are going to be acceptable to your partner. Marc, you are actually the one that created this, at least the only one I've ever heard share it, but making bids that are acceptable, bids of commitment that are smaller, that will lead to something bigger. So what really is commitment, right? It's the willingness to stay with a situation and work through problems, even when it's uncomfortable, that you are truly, that word, committed. We're going to work through this together. So, Marc, I'd love to know from you, why is it so easy to have commitment in your marriage with Jen? Like, what has helped you guys get to this place where you can really trust that commitment?
You know, actually, I was thinking about this earlier, and actually, I talked to my wife Jen. I asked her this question. I was like, "All right, I perceive that we're committed to each other. What makes that an easy thing to have?" And in our relationship, and she thought for a minute. She mentioned several things, and I was like, okay, yeah, these are good thoughts. She mentioned that we have a track record of good things, you know, good interactions. She can recognize that past good interactions. She can see that we can have good interactions currently. She anticipates that we can have that in the future. Now, that's not always the case when, say, your partner is leaning away, and that sort of shifts a little bit, as in the whatever the opposite of rose tinted glasses, like brown tinted glasses, gets kind of put over the. I was going to say poop tinted glasses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially the same. It kind of gets put over everything. This filter gets put over everything, and everything's viewed a little bit more negatively, and that certainly takes away from your ability to have commitment. But like essentially it's this idea that you've built up trust that your interactions can feel good, that the relationship is fulfilling. Even beyond that though, like in our conversation, we talked a lot about how a big part is that there's a lot of flexibility. This idea and this might not have, I think it applies to everyone. I had to ask myself, does this apply to everyone? Like that there's flexibility in being able to create goals to accommodate each other. Essentially, like what it came down to is we said, okay, if we want something in the relationship, I know that I can go to my wife, Jen, and I can talk to her. And I know that she will work through that with me and we can come up with a solution together. So in this case, like each person feels accommodated, each person feels like their opinion matters. Even beyond that, it's like this sense that I feel confident in our ability to resolve issues, and not even negative issues. Like sometimes it's like, hey, I want something positive in my life, and I can go to my wife Jen and she'll support me in that. And so like basically, if I have to break it down into like one or two words, I think a lot about what allows for commitment is trust. Like whether I can be fulfilled, whether I can solve problems, whether I can get supported with goals, whether I can, it's the sense that it's easy to say, yes, I can commit to this because I have a lot of trust and security myself in the situation, which seems odd because we were just saying a little bit earlier, like one of the reasons why we want commitment is to have that trust. But I'm saying some of that needs to be built up first, and then commitment is the result.
Agreed. So I'd love to know from you guys in the comments, what do you feel like needs to happen to create commitment? When you've had commitment in the past, what led up to that occurring? And now, more likely than not, trust has been broken, which is why commitment has also been broken, because that is one of the underlying roots.
I see a really good comment here, Heather, if I can share. So Sam is sharing, he says, my wife and I are talking, but it's mostly transactional. Time with the kids, how to use finances, making plans for school. In regards to our relationship, she keeps referencing that she doesn't think things can change because it will only be temporary. The problem is our arguments in the past were heated, and she said she felt lonely in this past year. And I wanted to point that out because and we're going to actually get to this in a bit, like how do we start building up some commitment. Like I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to make this comparison to say, hey, look at me, I'm patting myself on the back and like look at Sam's relationship and his isn't where mine, but like I'm going to compare them for a little bit. Like what I'm hearing from Sam is his wife doesn't have that same trust, doesn't feel like if she brings up certain issues that there's going to be that understanding, that cooperation or that collaboration. It's like I don't know if are you seeing it the same way? Is a lot of this about being able to build up trust in these things, and then the commitment is a result?
Absolutely. And are you guys seeing it too? Are you seeing it? Let us know in the comments if that's connecting for you guys, because it is that this trust builds up the belief that things can be good and the belief that we can commit to each other in this way. Mm-hmm. I think one of the challenges that we have is that you guys did commit to each other. A vow is a vow, like a marriage vow is a vow. And so many times I hear from you guys, and I felt this way myself, so I know where you're coming from. Well, they promised, like they vowed. Shouldn't they honor their commitment? Shouldn't they keep their vow? Like they already did commit to me. Why are they backing out? And I need to hold them to that commitment. And you're right. They did promise, they did vow, they did commit. And the reality is that they're breaking that now. The reality is they don't want to keep that promise. The reality is they don't want to be held over them. And the more that you try to hold it over them right now, the more it's actually going to backfire. And so you're right. And if you keep trying to just be right, it's not going to get you anywhere. Like it's just not. I'm just trying to give you like the real, honest, raw truth. Sometimes some people like want to like stake a flag and like go to war of like, you promised this thing. And their spouse is like, meh, walk away. Like I'm already walking away. You can rage all you want. You can tell me all you want. You can remind me of my vows. You can send me pictures of our happy married days. It just isn't going to matter right now. And that's just the truth. And we're here to give you guys the truth, because if you want to do something about it, now what we need to do is build up some levels of trust and security in a relationship. And Marc, you had mentioned how there are these smaller bids for commitment that we can ask for even in these stages. So the comment from this Facebook member here is a great one, because there are things that you can do and things that Laura can do and everyone here commenting and listening can do that actually are going to be received at this time. While they're not going to receive, hey, let's go renew our vows, like let's go put on our wedding rings again and let's go to the Bahamas. Like they're not going to receive that right now. But there are things that they will receive, levels of commitment that you both can have that are going to start to build up that trust that you're seeking. So when your spouse is saying, when she's saying like, you don't listen to me and I'm so lonely, you can start to change that story with these smaller bids for connection and smaller bids for commitment. So if you guys want to know what bids for connection and commitment would be appropriate for you, just leave a comment, say me right now in the chat, and we'll get back to you and show you, we'll meet with you guys and show you what levels of commitment your spouse will respond to positively with where you're at right now. Because that's going to be how you get to where you really want to be, where you're fully committed and they fully give you their heart again.
Mhm. So should we break it down, like what actually builds up commitment? Are we at
Yeah,
that
let's
point?
do it.
Yeah. All right. So I think first off, one of the big pieces of this is the degree to which you can create a sense of togetherness or cooperation or collaboration. Would you agree? I think like that's, I think one of the key pieces. We were talking a lot about, can we build up trust and solutions? Can we build up some sense that like even positive goals can be supported? But I think a lot of that, if we boil it all down, it's, you know, within the interactions, is there that sense of togetherness or collaboration? Even if it's not on the relationship, is that present somewhere? Thoughts out there? Like, is that key piece here? Yes.
Right. So what you want right now, because I talked to you guys so much, I can probably imagine some of the thoughts going through your mind right now. You're saying, I want them to be collaborating with me and together with me on the relationship. I want them to cooperate on working on things with me. And if that's not where you're at, though, that's not where you're at. And so oftentimes we'll see that there is a layer of, well, I'm willing to collaborate with you and have a sense of this togetherness and the sense of cooperation about the kids, right? Or about some other area of our life that we do share and is important to us right now. I can agree that we do want this process to go smoothly and that we want to talk to each other respectfully. Like those are things that almost universally you and your spouse are going to agree upon, even if they're wanting a divorce, even if you're talking to lawyers, even if you're talking about separation and all the things. So that collaboration is a process of working towards cooperation. And cooperation is actually taking action together.
I want to point out something because I can already hear the protests from people that listen. They're like, but my spouse doesn't want to cooperate on anything. They don't want to collaborate on it. And I'm gonna point out is part of the problem is you're not recognizing where the requests actually are. So if they're saying, please don't talk to me, we can't have any conversation or things like that, there's still things that are being requested here. As in like, hey, I only want to communicate about the kids. Okay. Why? Why is that important? What is the concern? And it might be like, you're just going to try to you're going to hang on, you're going to create arguments or whatnot. Okay, so that person wants some peace. They want to step away from the drama. Now you've identified some goals that you can support and you can collaborate with. You say, okay, look, you want some peace, you want some drama-free interactions. I want to support that, and I would like to talk about some solutions. What I'm getting at here is, even like hard walls like that, hard boundaries, generally indicate something that's wanted and something that you can lightly poke at to figure out what that is, and you can actually create some amount of collaboration or togetherness around that. You might even tell me, Mark, well, if they're saying that they need space, how does that bring us closer together? And I'm going to say, if you're supporting them even on some goals like that, you're building up trust, which is what we're needing. We're needing that sense. We need your partner to say, hey, look, I'm feeling supported in the things that matter to me.
Yeah.
Conversely, go ahead.
What's really awesome here is like Mark and the coaches are like a decoder of what you're missing that your spouse is actually saying. Like our own emotions are so heightened when our spouse is pulling away and we're going through this kind of process, right? Like it's so awful. So we often don't see it for what it is, right? And what's really cool, like with our client Christy that shared at the beginning here, is we help kind of like decode what your spouse is actually asking for and show you what's going to be effective at this stage. Even the stage of like, I'm already divorced, even the stage of we're signing papers like tomorrow. Like there are things that they're asking for. And so they'll help kind of decode what your spouse is saying so that you can realize the opportunity that you have there. And yeah, it's going to be these smaller things at first, but they really start to get the momentum going. And once the momentum starts going, it tends to go faster and faster and faster. So slower at first, right? But just like the train picking up speed, it's going to get more traction as you go along.
I do want to point out, like, a lot of this might imply that we're just so focused on the other partner and accommodating them. But, you know, if you're doing this well and things are at least relatively healthy between the two of you, it does mean protecting both parties' interests. And it doesn't mean that you just sacrifice your own wants or needs at the expense of accommodating the other person. I think there's a lot of room here within agreed upon goals for you to speak up. So if you're saying, hey, okay, we're agreeing that there needs to be some communication and there needs to be respect. If that's the case, then I really need this from you. If I'm going to back off a little bit, if I'm going to give you a little bit of space, then I need something from you. If this is something that we're agreeing to. And that's important. I do think that that's important to have a little bit of that give and take and a little bit of that sense of, once again, sense of collaboration, that you're working together towards something. It's gaining commitment and gaining trust that a lot of this is sustainable. And if, you know, sometimes I do suggest we make it a little bit lopsided, but always that's with the intention of balancing it out, because otherwise it's harder to build up trust. If it's just give, or I'm going to accept the blame and I'm going to, I agree that I'm the one that did things wrong, it doesn't end up building up trust in the end. So.
Agreed. All right. So that is about collaboration and how to work towards things together and have cooperation. Mm-hmm. And that applies to all different levels of your relationship. And if you want more help to identify what those are for you, again, leave a comment, say me, and we'll show you what will work for you at this stage. The other element that really helps to build up this commitment is recognizing wins, making more accommodations, and having good moments. We talk about building up a positive narrative. And one of the things I love that Marc teaches is home messages. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here. But I'm using those in my marriage. Well, that sounds a little weird. It's just become like a habit, right? Oh, yeah. If there's something I feel like is a little weak in my marriage, which right now is still, there's still moments of like Ben doesn't like to really open up sometimes. And if I push too hard, he's going to close up completely. So I really have to work on the home message. It feels really good to share openly. I really appreciate that you shared that, and building up this positive narrative that it's safe to share. It's safe to work through things together. And so this is a narrative that I've been working to build up for several years, right? And my marriage is really healthy, and I'm living my dream marriage right now. Like, it wasn't always that way, but it's really recognizing the good moments, celebrating those good moments, recognizing accommodations that you guys made for each other, and really building up that positive regard, even unconditional positive regard. That's one thing I'm working on still. But where we shift any kind of, I see this in a negative way, to, how could I see this in a positive way, right? And that really builds that deep level of connection, because it takes us out of the drama triangle and puts us into collaboration, which is the other step we just talked about. But it really brings us together in a lot of unity and harmony. And it makes the marriage so fulfilling when you just celebrate what's going well. And you praise what you want repeated, because if you want it repeated, give it a little praise and you'll see that your partner is much more willing to do it. So Marc, what have you seen with this?
Yeah, like you said, like, even though like you and Ben aren't struggling, you still, I absolutely think that this is a good idea for any relationship, not just romantic relationships even, but like No, just even any relationship. I've even started applying this a little bit with my relationship with my children, and like, what is the takeaway message that I want them to have from my interactions with them? And so I make sure to highlight those sort of things. You know, like Joanne in the comments is saying, like, my husband just wants to resolve financial issues and get on with his life. Do I leave him alone? But, you know, like, you know, in this case, if we're applying this and we're saying, okay, we're gonna create some collaboration around that, and, you know, Joanne is supporting him on making sure that things feel good financially, it's still even important, even in those moments, to recognize where the two of them can communicate and the two of them can work some things out, and that there can be some support. Now, I would contend, I don't know if you agree with this, Heather, but I would say most marriages fall apart as one or both of the individuals stops seeing those solutions and those good moments and those those cooperative actions here, those all those little good things. It's they stop seeing that, they stop recognizing it, and a lot of like this outward communication around the recognition is meant to build that back up or to defend against that kind of natural decline. I mean, would you say that that's really at the heart of a lot of these relationships that start falling apart?
Yeah, 100%. That's why we focus so much on the narrative, more than anyone else I've ever heard out there. That's really important that we recognize that you have a story about the relationship and so does your spouse. And if that story isn't a positive one, then what do you do about that, right? And that's what we help you do, is shift that narrative so that even if right now, like, it's not uncommon for us to hear, well, my spouse views everything I do in a negative light. Well, yeah, that's really common. And so that's what we help you do, is shift both your story about it, right? So that you are recognizing the wins, the good moments, that you're building up a positive story about your relationship, but that your spouse can do that as well and let go of the old story about you. Oftentimes I'll call that like seeing you with fresh eyes, and both of you seeing you for who you really are. And that really helps to make the relationship fulfilling and deepen that level of commitment. Because if you have a good story about your relationship, you know that good things have happened and good things are happening and good things will happen, you're much more interested in being committed to that person and to that relationship, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So what happens now when we have some speed bumps? Maybe we have an idea, a sense of cooperation and collaboration, and we're recognizing things, but then boom, something happens, a speed bump, maybe something triggers us that our spouse does or says, or maybe some life event happens.
I put this in here as a topic to discuss, in large part because, like I said, I had this conversation with my wife and what allows for commitment, and she spoke a lot about that flexibility. You know, it was this, she and I talked about this in terms of like a sense that there's some understanding or some acceptance that not everything immediately presents itself well, and we kind of understand that. I guess a little bit of this is like having some amount of resilience or some amount of like just recognition that, hey, we might have some misunderstanding here, and like, so Jen and I are able to do that, and because we know that if that misunderstanding is going on, we can be flexible, and then we can be patient, we can be understanding, and we can get to the bottom of it. I mean, that kind of goes back to that sense of collaboration. But I do think that this sort of idea, the idea of resilience or flexibility, really makes it a lot easier to get to that commitment, largely because it makes solutions a lot easier. I think that's my opinion. Like, I've noticed that when Jen and I are less strict on what specific solution needs to happen, and a lot more willing to discuss the many solutions to a specific problem, it makes it so much easier to have that conversation, to commit to working through through the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is an idea of like, let's get on the same side of the table and it's us against this issue. And it's us and where we really want to go, right? When you know where you really want to go, then the how you get there, you can work together on that. It's not as important as you're both on the same page as where you want to go. And I'll just share a little bit. One of the reasons why I was so driven to help couples was because I saw speed bumps happen, right? We had a speed bump with going through cancer. And through that experience, my husband was like, so with me. Like it was baffling to me to receive that much unconditional love because I wasn't being XYZ wife like I thought I needed to be in order to have a good marriage. I wasn't doing all the things and he was still loving me. And I saw other couples go through similar health challenges and it totally crumbled, like their relationship. And so they didn't have that flexibility, that acceptance of these different challenges and the willingness to stick it out no matter what. And that really struck me and made me realize, like, I want to be able to help more people experience what I experienced with my husband. And what is it that, you know, that he had or we had that created commitment through those different challenges and through those different setbacks or different speed bumps, right? And it really was the acceptance, right? That it's okay when our situation doesn't 100% meet our expectation, right? It's accountability. Each person is responsible for their own contribution to this. And it's a support, willingness to help your spouse in those areas where they are struggling and to give them some grace and know that everything isn't always going to be 50-50. It's not always going to be even or fair, but sometimes I'm going to give and sometimes you're going to give and sometimes you're going to need to receive and sometimes I'm going to need to receive and go through the ebbs and flows of life like that. And so that's what we've really seen in healthy couples is that they balance that level of accountability, acceptance, and support.
And I think, honestly, I really think that balance is difficult. It's there's so many ways that can go wrong. Like I see when you lean maybe a bit too heavy on accountability, that starts looking like rigidity or control. If you start saying, well, you need to pick up your part of this mess and you need to do this and you need to do, that starts looking like control. And if we lean a little bit too much on acceptance, well, now you're just a pushover and you're not actually speaking up for what is needed. And same thing with support. If you're just giving and giving and giving, well, that even in of itself, like if you're supporting so much, resentment starts building up as you've maybe pushed down your own needs. And I'm not going to say that these three items it's an exhaustive list, but I do think that some balance in that where you have some accountability where you say, okay, you know, this part is mine, this other piece is not, and I can accept you with this piece here. I'm going to support you in trying to overcome that, and I'm going to accept support in dealing with my own weaknesses and sensitivities is a really, really beautiful place to be in. But like applying this to commitment, having that flexibility, that acceptance, that accountability really helps things feel calm. It helps things feel secure. It helps the person who's kind of a little bit iffy about this feel like things are safe. There's a safe environment to resolve these concerns that I have that are causing me to lean out. It makes it easy for this person to say, okay, I can consider a little bit of commitment here.
Yeah. And so that is what we can help you do if your spouse is pulling away, is help create that safe environment so that they will feel like, okay, it's okay to give a little trust here. It's okay for me to be a little vulnerable. It's okay for me to give a little bit of commitment. And then we'll start to build on that commitment with you throughout this whole process to the point where they're like, I love you and I want to be with you and give you my heart fully again. And I only want to be with you. And that's what we help our clients get to. So if you want help with that, again, leave a comment, say commitment below, and we will show you exactly how we can help you get there also. Now, our suggestions here, they're not exhaustive. We try to do this high level approach and give as much insight as we can from our experience with helping thousands of couples now. And so just know that there is more to this, and reach out to us if you're wanting more help. And Marc, any final thoughts on commitment here?
Yeah, like you said, this isn't exhaustive. That's good to recognize. I think a big part of like what we were trying to discuss today, we're trying to help you see what contributes to commitment. There's a lot of things that can contribute to commitment, but to sum everything up, a large portion of this is about helping the wayward spouse see the ability to resolve problems within the relationship. The whole reason why they're leaning out. And a lot of what we discussed today are essentially ways to help foster better communication around resolving those concerns. But I do have one final thought just on commitment in general, and it's to say that commitment is really about making a decision. The decision is made a lot easier when the decision feels safe and secure. And it feels secure when it's perceived that there are lots of different ways to create these solutions. Essentially, when we know what can be expected, it becomes easier and easier to create the commitment when we've built up this trust in that ability to create these solutions. So this is a lot of like what the theme is. And I'm hoping you're seeing things in the bigger picture, because if you've made that mistake and you said, commit to this, like you're leaning out, no, we need to sit down and work on this. Why are you getting upset that I'm telling you that we need to work on this? You see why. It's because we've not really, in those situations, we've not made that decision to commit safe and secure. And that's like what we're settling it all down. So, Heather, you and I were talking just before this, and I brought up the question. I was like, does this address enough like when there's a really resistant spouse? And I would love to hear your feedback on this. If you can put it into the comments, if you feel like, okay, I'm hearing you, Marc and Heather, but I just don't think that, I think my spouse is too far gone, they're too resistant. If you'd like us to kind of go a little bit deeper into this and talk about what to do with commitment when there is a lot of resistance, we would love to hear about that, and we'd love to maybe deepen the topic and perhaps another live stream here. So let us know. We want to hear from you.
Awesome. Yeah. And comment what stood out to you today. Was it recognizing that pushing for commitment too soon is going to backfire? Was it realizing that there are levels of commitment that your spouse will agree to right now, no matter where you are? We will find them with you. They are there. Trust us. That's what our clients do with us all the time. And we can help you with that as well. Did that stand out to you? Or was it understanding what really creates a level of commitment and how to increase trust so that therefore levels of commitment are even deeper? Whatever stood out to you, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to know. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to our channel so that you can see how we help couples save their marriage from divorce and create a marriage that truly, truly thrives. So thank you so much for joining. We are going to be off for the holidays next week, but we will be back after that in the new year. And we wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thanks for joining today. And thank you, Marc.
See you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.